Welcome to Triple S Reviews. I'm your host Triple S, and today we're going to point-by-point review and analyse episodes 4 to 6 of Andor Season 2. Let's begin. Point number 1. Love the design of this location on Gorman, the sharp angles and how it's multi-tier, very cool looking. And just like the TIE Avenger and Chandrila in the last episode, this episode marks the first proper appearance of Gorman on the big screen in both Legends and canon. In Legends, it first appeared in the 1993 video game Star Wars X-Wing, which Star Wars TIE Fighter, which had the first appearance of the TIE Avenger, was the sequel of. Point number 2. This room has to have been intentionally made to look like the bridge of a Star Destroyer, with the raised central walkway and the computer stations lower down on each side. It just can't be a coincidence. Point number 3. Neat that we get to see the Ministry of Enlightenment's work that was mentioned back in episode 1 actually being shown to have an effect, even if it is ED buying into their propaganda. Just the irony of how she calls Cyril gullible, that's what's really breathtaking. But as we've seen in real life politics recently, an army of gullible idiots is still an army, and can be made to believe and do whoever's pulling their strings wants them to. Even those who don't fall for the propaganda still have to go along with it, giving their oaths of loyalty and capitulating just to keep their jobs, their businesses. Truly insane how Andor Season 2 was filmed from late 2022 to early 2024, yet so much of the show applies to the state of current politics, especially in the US. Point number 4. Actually, the reason so much of the show applies to the state of current politics is because the state of current politics, especially in the US, feels like a repeat of the state of politics that applied to Nazi Germany in World War II. If anyone watching disagrees with me on that, please leave now. So, World War II is what the writers of this show actually seem to be inspired by, since the Gorman rebels are very clearly based on the French resistance that operated in, you guessed it, France during World War II. The language Gorman speak sounds very similar to French, so much so I thought it was French at first, but reading what French speakers in various Star Wars Reddits have said on the matter, it apparently isn't actually French. And Gorman itself, being a location famous for its fashion, is just like how Paris, reading directly from Wikipedia, has been an international fashion capital, particularly in the domain of haute couture, clothing handmade to order for private clients. Point number 5. Speaking of World War II, it's funny that Richard Samuel, who plays Gorman/French rebel leader Cairo Rylance, played Sergeant Rachtman in Inglourious Bastards, who was the Nazi that got his head bashed in with a baseball bat. Point number 6. The mother is terrifying might be the best line of the episode. Point number 7. So Cassian's nervous about him and Bix being recognised and turned in even when all they're doing is shopping, but I think there's also another level of anxiety about this for Cassian because he knows even when you're just walking around doing nothing suspicious and no one recognises you, it can still lead to you being locked up, because that's exactly what happened to him back in Season 1 Episode 7 on the planet Niamos, which I completely forgot was called Niamos, or I would have mentioned it when the bop, also called Niamos, was played in the last episode. Point number 8. I like seeing something so mundane as a small grocery shop in Star Wars. Reminds me of when we saw Dexter's Diner back in Attack of the Clones. These very grounded everyday locations just give so much life to Star Wars. It helps me to much more easily immerse myself into the show. Point number 9. Goddamn, can Bix catch a break already? She was tortured by Dr. Gorst, almost got graped, and now she's got guilt over Cassian killing a guy because he saw her face, to the point she's medicating herself to stop Gorsk from torturing her in her nightmares with her guilt, like she's taking Hypnosil to stop from dreaming about Freddy Krueger or something. Point number 10. Cyril must have taken some hardcore acting classes over the past year to be able to go undercover and lie so convincingly. I mean, the change in Cyril from last season to this is just insane. Dedra most likely playing a big part in that change. Point number 11. Gorman front? You sure it's not the people's front of Gorman, Cyril? Point number 12. Seeing here and in episode 6 Mon Mothma's loss of faith in politics and the Senate and relying on both to get things fixed, especially when she says,
"If we do not stand together, we will be crushed,"
really sets up how she eventually commits fully with the rebellion and convinces the many rebel cells to join together into the alliance to restore the Republic, which we've already seen in Season 3 Episode 18 of Rebels, when she gave her declaration of the Rebel Alliance. Point number 13. This town meeting gives me Season 3 Episode 3 of The Crown vibes, that episode being about the Aberfan disaster and including a similar hostile town meeting. Point number 14. This isn't the first time we've seen Dakar ever, but it is the first time we've seen it in a long while. You'll most likely recognise it as being the rebel base seen in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, but I believe its last on-screen appearance before this episode was in Star Wars Resistance Season 2 Episode 2, and that episode was released all the way back in 2019. If I'm wrong about that being its last on-screen appearance though, please correct me in the comments. Point number 15. I can't be the only one who thought at first that Saw Gerrera had a Wampa working for him, but that's not a Wampa. It's a Gygoran called Moroth, and he actually appeared in Rogue One, which I didn't remember he was in until I looked him up. Point number 16. Another year and Saw's still got his legs. I wonder if we'll get to see him lose them in this show, or just out of nowhere he'll suddenly have the prosthetic legs that he has by the time of Rogue One. Point number 17. Speaking of losing a foot, last time I saw Pluty was in 1883. His name though back then was Yosef, and he'd had his leg cut off after being bit by a snake. All joking aside, Pluty is played by Mark Rissman, and Game of Thrones fans will also recognise him as Harry Strickland, the guy who led the useless Golden Company and disappointed Cersei by not bringing their elephants to King's Landing. When I saw him after Saw calls him over, I actually thought at first it was Girdis, and somehow he was alive and well after he escaped from the inside of the Doodah, Boba Fett style. Let's move on now to episode 5. Point number 18. Speaking of Game of Thrones, sort of, Attendant Grimish here, played by Kurt Agiwan, will most likely be recognised as having played Grand Maester Orwell by fans of House of the Dragon. Point number 19. This Gorman front woman must have been thinking, when Cyril stopped in front of her and turned in her direction, like he'd found out who she really was and was going to confront her. You can see her keeping her head down while everyone else is looking up at Cyril. She must have been bricking it. Point number 20. So let's talk about the Tarkin massacre and how it's related to the Gorman massacre from Legends. As this hotel worker tells Cassian, in 19 BBY, Tarkin landed his cruiser on Gormans that were peacefully protesting. The same thing happened in Legends, was instead called the Gorman Massacre, and is what led Gorman to start plotting to rebel against the Empire and eventually join the Alliance to restore the Republic 17 years later. Since the Gorman Massacre in Legends is called the Tarkin Massacre in canon, this means we've yet to see the canonical Gorman Massacre, and with it already being established to happen in 2 BBY, we'll most likely see it happen in the next 3 episodes of Andor. Point number 21. Do we think it was actually Partagaz who wanted Cyril followed? Or was it Dedra who did it to make sure nothing happened to Cyril? Point number 22. Getting it on with the lights off? Kinky. You can make out in the darkness as well that Dedra doesn't move. Cyril has to walk all the way over to her in the dark, making sure not to trip over his suitcase. Point number 23. It's interesting seeing Cassian schooling Enza on tradecraft and how to do it successfully. It highlights just how inexperienced the Gormans are in being rebels, and are way in over their heads in trying to go up against the Empire when it comes to espionage. Point number 24.
If I say this is the greatest day of my life, does it spoil everything?
I wonder if Dedra's thinking, oh, so saving me wasn't the best moment of your life? Or maybe she's thinking that was the best moment of her life. Point number 25. So, just like the Empire having too much information to handle from their overabundance of arrests, Luthen's also got too much information to handle from his overabundance of taps and informants. Point number 26. So, you can interpret this as Saw having fed Pluty a specific location to see if the Empire would set anything up at said location, revealing Pluty to be a traitor, or knowing just how paranoid Saw can be about everyone and everything, maybe Saw only suspected Pluty to be a traitor but decided to get rid of him now just to be safe, and also because Wilman was readily available as the perfect replacement. Or Saw just decided he didn't want to run the risk of Pluty messing up and getting everyone killed, so he framed him as a traitor to save face in front of the rest of his followers, rather than admit he chose poorly in who Wilman should teach the variations to. Point number 27. Pretty sick looking this camera on the X-Wing's wing shot as it goes into hyperspace. Point number 28. In case you didn't know, Onderon is the homeworld of Saw Gerrera, and it made its first canon appearance in the Clone Wars Season 5 Episode 2. That episode took place in 20 BBY, 17 years before this episode, and this is what Saw looked like back then. Crazy, right? Point number 29. If you're wondering, maybe Saw Gerrera wasn't huffing oxygen or medicine with that mask of his in Rogue One, but instead was huffing Rhydonium like he does at the end of this episode, then you are 100% correct. According to this Entertainment Weekly article, Tony Gilroy never actually had an idea of what Saw was huffing in Rogue One. So writer Beau Willimon came to him and said, hey, what if it's this? The this being Rhydonium. Essentially then, Luthen just gave Saw a machine that helped him get hooked on huffing petrol. Nice. Point number 30.
Revolution is not for the same.
Best line of the episode, and really speaks to how Luthen is going mad from trying to manage everything he has going on, and how Cassian doesn't think what the Gormans are trying to do makes any sense at all, committing a crime and then announcing it to everyone. Saw knows though, sometimes you have to do insane stuff to get the results you want, and along the way you might go a little bit insane yourself. That was episode 5, on to episode 6. Point number 31. So both Luthen and the Empire want Gorman to rebel, not for the good of the planet or the galaxy, but for their own twisted reasons. The Empire wants Gorman to rebel so that they can have an excuse to take complete control over the planet, which is something they believe they'll be easily able to do because Gorman isn't a militaristic planet. Then they'll be able to mine for Calcite, which will allow them to complete the Death Star, increasing the Empire's control significantly under the guise of making the galaxy safer and securer. Luthen, though, wants Gorman to rebel because despite Cassian telling him they're not ready to, Luthen knows that when the planet falls, it will aid the rebellion by being a rallying cry for others to rise up and oppose the Empire. Luthen is just Lord Farquaad.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
I mean, yeah, he always has been, sending people out to do the dirty work for him, but sacrificing an entire planet, that's majorly crossing the line. Point number 32.
It's tough squeezing a whole year's worth of insincerity into 3 nights.
This has got to be a tongue-in-cheek reference to how there's a year gap between every 3 episodes this season, and the 3 episodes that need to have as much squeezed in to make up for not seeing the rest of the year. Point number 33.
Calibrate your enthusiasm.
That's this episode's best line, and good advice for everyone, I think. Point number 34. Oh, that's some great framing with Vel and Cinta in the yin-yang looking window. Reading from Wikipedia, yin and yang can be thought of as complementary and at the same time opposing forces that interact to form a dynamic system, in which the whole is greater than the assembled parts and the parts are important for cohesion of the whole, which describes Vel and Cinta pretty well, I think. However, though the window resembles the yin-yang symbol, that hard line across it that's separating the two could be foreshadowing that even though they're back together, they're going to end up separated again, this time permanently. Point number 35. Cinta's been in an accident. Did it perchance involve a crashing hover car that resulted in the death of its only passenger? Point number 36. Poor Cyril being lied to by the love of his life that he's just helping to keep the peace on Gorman, when in reality he's aiding the Empire in goading Gorman into rebellion, so that they can come down hard and take control of the entire planet. No eyebrows raised, no questions asked. Point number 37. The Gorman front should really count themselves lucky they're working with Luthen and not, say, Saw Gerrera. If Drina and Sam had spoken to Saw like they speak to Vel and Cinta, he would have no problem pulling a Pluty on them. Point number 38. If you've got an issue seeing 2 women kissing in a Star Wars TV show, yet don't have a problem seeing torture, murder, attempted rape, gore, etc, etc, stop watching right now and go and figure out how to become less of a bigot. Thank you. Point number 39. Oh shit, I didn't know the San Shayun were canon to the Star Wars universe. This galaxy far, far away must be where they escaped to after Halo 3. Joking aside, this is actually another instance, like the TIE Avenger, of the writers including something pretty obscure from Star Wars lore. In fact, this is so obscure it has only ever been mentioned once, in Star Wars Dawn of the Rebellion, the visual guide. And from that guide we learn this alien is filling the role of the Oathkeeper. Point number 40. Oh hey, it's Bail. Wait a minute, that's not Jimmy Smits. Nope, it's Benjamin Bratt playing Bail Organa here because Jimmy wasn't able to return due to working on another TV show. And if you're confused why they would recast Bail for such a small scene, instead of just cutting the character's appearance entirely, according to showrunner Tony Gilroy in this Entertainment Weekly article, I put him in episode 6 in an arbitrary way so people will get the conversation out of the way until the next week when he really starts to work. Gilroy continues, it's one of those situations where I want to do something simple. We don't do many things that are unnecessary, but it's like, let's get him in here now so people can discuss it for a week and get it out of their system, and then he can come back to really work. I didn't want the guy's work to be confused with his introduction. So expect to see more of Benjamin Bratt as Bail Organa in the coming episodes. I mean, he has to join Mon Mothma in rebelling against the Empire after all. Point number 41. Want to know more about this lost empire that Luthen mentions? Yeah, me too. I sprinted straight to Wikipedia to find out more, but apparently this is the first time it's ever been mentioned. It's not even a thing in Legends, which I find surprising. I wonder though if it could be referring to the Rakatans' infinite empire, an empire you could consider having been lost when the Rakatan race race almost went extinct due to messing around with the dark side of the Force. Who knows? Point number 42. Mon Mothma and Krennic going head to head is just amazing to see. An absolute treat. And hearing some of the things Krennic says and how they apply today, like when he says,
"Words do still have meaning."
It just makes me think of how those who are anti-trans say trans people are not the gender they identify as, because man and woman have specific definitions, which is just an idiotic argument, but I won't get into that here. All I'll say is, if you agree with what anti-trans people say, please just stop watching. Go away and learn how to become less of a bigot. Thank you. And then also when Krennic says,
"My rebel is your terrorist." Something like that.
You just know which sides he would pick if he had to choose between Palestine and Israel, Russia and Ukraine, the USA and its own citizens. Just fuck you, Krennic. Point number 43. Am I insane, or does this piece of art behind Krennic look a heck of a lot like the half-finished Death Star 2 that we see in Return of the Jedi? Point number 44. At least Brasso's pointless death in episode 3 came at the hands of someone actually trying to kill him. Cinta's accidental death here though is just even more indicative of how unexpected and pointless death can be. Also, in my opinion, it was a 50-50 shot, no pun intended, on if it would be Cinta or Vel that would end up dying. On the one hand, we had the sudden reappearance of Cinta after she's recovered from her accident and has now decided she wants to have a proper relationship with Vel. But then, on the other hand, we also had the scene of Mon Mothma asking Luthen to get Vel to check in because she cares about her. So that stray blaster shot could have hit either of them, and I wouldn't have been surprised either way. Point number 45. What makes Cinta's death even more pointless is that it happened while Sam was fighting with Lazine, a guy who would have understood and been all for what was happening if Sam hadn't disobeyed orders, brought along a blaster and threatened Lazine with it. Point number 46. With how Krennic would look over at Lonnie and Clea and how her hand started bleeding, I really thought that when he made it over to where they were standing, he was going to see at least one drop of blood on the floor, and his suspicion that Lonnie and Clea were up to something was just going to increase significantly. Point number 47. I like how while Clea says the Tinian Codex came from a planet that considered sight a disability, Lonnie switches things up and instead describes it as coming from a planet that considered blindness a gift. Also, hearing Krennic talk about blindness just makes me think of this moment from Rogue One.
Are we blind? Deploy the garrison!
Point number 48. While Vel doesn't physically murder Sam, she does a hell of a job emotionally murdering him. The passion with how Vel describes Cinta and how she really hammers it home the guilt that Sam's gonna feel potentially forever. Oh man, this scene is just so good. Point number 49. If Krennic did die here, I wonder how much that would have actually changed the future. Point number 50. Hell fucking yes that we get to see Bix get a revenge on Ghost, giving him a taste of his own medicine. Now you might be thinking, oh, Luthen really followed through when Cassian told him he needs to help out in making Bix better. What a great guy, showing he does actually care about those working for him. But I think, in reality, Lonnie, after hearing from Partagaz that Ghost was going to transform from a one-man asset into an entire program, and that program would then aid in efficiently getting information out of the Empire's overabundance of prisoners, got that information to Luthen, who realised he could actually kill two birds with one stone. By sending Bix and Cassian to take out Ghost, it would hopefully give Bix some closure by getting revenge, and it would mess up the Empire's plans to make a whole bunch of new Ghosts. If there weren't actually any plans to expand Ghost into a program, I doubt Luthen would have bothered setting it up so that Bix and Cassian could get close enough to kill him. And of course, Ghost only vaguely remembers Bix. Some real M. Bison from the Street Fighter movie energy.
The day Bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
And speaking of Luthen, a lot of people got mad at him over the last 3 episodes. Cassian, Mon Mothma, Vel, Clea. I really wonder how much longer people are going to keep putting up with him. To round all this off, I cannot think of anything that I had any particular issue with in these 3 episodes. They were all amazing. So let's just skip to my most favourite part from all 3 episodes, the entirety of Saw Gerrera in episode 5. Forrest Whitaker is always a tour de force of Saw Gerrera, but especially in episode 5. And especially at the end with his speech to Wilman. He just absolutely knocks it right out of the park. Thank you everyone for watching Triple S Reviews. If you enjoyed the video, and I hope you did, give it a like to let me know. And if you want to see more, then make sure to sub and check your sub tab for new videos. I also have a variety channel where I post a variety of different videos. If any of them interest you, check them out. I've been Triple S, you've all been amazing, and I shall see you all in the next video.